You think they're in control? Let me show you what happens when someone thinks they can mess with my home. That's the thought running through my mind as I stand at my front door, staring at the new lock they've installed without my permission. I knew something wasn't right when I came home last night, but this was personal. HOA, or as I like to call them, the neighborhood overlords, had crossed the line. They thought they could take my property without even so much as a warning. Well, now they were about to learn that messing with me was a mistake. My name is Jake Anderson, and I'm the kind of guy who doesn't let people walk all over me. You could say I'm a man of principle, a man who values his privacy, his property, and his rights. When I bought this house, it wasn't just a place to live. It was a legacy, a connection to my family's past. My grandfather built it. My father maintained it. And now, it was my turn to protect it. The first sign that something was wrong came a few weeks ago when I noticed Linda Thompson, the president of the HOA, lurking around the property, clipboard in hand, pretending to be checking on things. She was the type to always be in everyone's business, telling people how to live, what to do, how to keep their lawns. But this time, something felt off. Sure enough, the very next day, I received a letter stating that I was in violation of some obscure rule, like I hadn't been paying attention to the grass growing an inch too high or not placing the trash can exactly where she thought it should be. I wasn't surprised. Linda had a reputation for making everyone's life miserable, and she'd been trying to push me out of the neighborhood for months. She had her eyes on this property for a while, but I wasn't going to let that happen. I stood my ground. But it wasn't until the day that I realized just how far she would go. Walking up the steps, I fumbled for my keys, ready to go inside after a long day at work. When I reached for the doorknob, I felt the cold metal, but something was different. The lock didn't turn. I tried again, but the door wouldn't budge. What the hell? I had the keys right here. Panic set in for a second, but then I saw the note attached to the door frame. It was short and sweet. For your safety and the safety of the neighborhood, we've changed your locks. Please contact the HOA for access. I couldn't believe it. They had changed the locks on my door without even telling me. No warning, no respect for my rights as the homeowner. This was more than just an inconvenience. This was a direct assault on my autonomy. Linda thought she could control me, control my home. She thought she could get away with it. But what she didn't know was that I wasn't about to let her win. This wasn't just about a lock. This was about sending a message that would make her regret ever thinking she could mess with me. I walked away from the door, heart racing but focused. I had a plan. And this plan wasn't just any plan. It was going to make Linda and her HOA wish they had never crossed me. I wasn't going to fight them with legal jargon or words. No, I had something far better. I had something they could never take away from me. My home, my rules. And if they wanted to play dirty, I would give them a taste of their own medicine. I had never felt so betrayed in my life. Standing there in front of my door, staring at that note, everything I had worked so hard for suddenly felt like it was slipping through my fingers. Linda Thompson and her HOA had crossed a line I could never forgive. They thought they could just come in and take over my home like it was theirs, like my rights didn't matter. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. I needed a plan, something so simple, so brilliant, they wouldn't even know what hit them. But first, I had to take a step back and think this through. It wasn't just the lock. It was about respect, about standing up for what's mine. The thought kept running through my head as I paced around my front yard, the sun setting behind me, casting long shadows across the lawn. The more I thought about it, the clearer the solution became. Linda thought she could intimidate me. She thought I would cower and just pay whatever ridiculous fine she decided to throw at me. But she didn't know who she was dealing with. I wasn't some pushover homeowner. I was someone who valued his privacy, his independence, and his right to defend what was his. It's funny how much you take your home for granted until someone tries to take it away from you. I had always been the type to handle things myself, to fix things when they broke, to never rely on anyone. I wasn't going to start now. The plan was simple, but it would send the message loud and clear. I wasn't just going to change the locks back. No, that would be too easy. I needed something they couldn't touch, something that would make them realize just how far I was willing to go. I spent the next few hours thinking about it, mapping out my strategy in my head like I was preparing for a military operation. My background in security systems and engineering made this the perfect challenge for me. I knew exactly how to make it work. It didn't take long to decide on my next move. The answer was sitting right in front of me, the door. It was the heart of the house, The one thing that separated the inside from the outside, my sanctuary from the world that had no business being in it. But a regular door? Not good enough. I needed something more. A door that wasn't just a door. A door that would be impossible to break into. I drove to the hardware store, my mind racing with excitement. I had a plan, and it was going to be perfect. By the time I returned home, the sun was down, and the world around me had gone quiet. I set to work, pulling out the old door and replacing it with something far more secure. It wasn't just a door, it was a bank vault door. I had managed to get my hands on a heavy-duty, secure door that was practically indestructible. It wasn't just about keeping Linda out anymore. It was about making sure no one, especially her, could mess with what was mine. As I worked, I could feel the tension in my shoulders start to ease. This wasn't just a door, it was a statement. A statement that no one was going to take my home from me. The sound of the tools clicking into place was like music to my ears, a perfect rhythm of justice being served in real time. By the time I finished, the door was secure, the lock was solid, and Linda's little HOA scheme had just hit a brick wall. I stood there for a moment, surveying my work. The vault door gleamed in the dim light of the porch light. It wasn't just a barrier, it was a message. And I couldn't wait to see the look on Linda's face when she realized what I had done. They thought they could bully me into submission, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't backing down. I was taking my home back. And this time, no one was going to touch it. The next morning, I woke up to a strange feeling of calm. The usual sounds of the neighborhood, the distant hum of traffic, the chatter of birds, and the occasional clink of someone's garden tools seemed to fade into the background as I stood in front of my house, admiring my work. The vault door was exactly what I needed. It was a physical barrier, yes, but more than that, it was a symbol of my defiance. No one was going to walk into my home and treat it like a doormat. Not Linda, not the HOA, and certainly not anyone who thought they could push me around. The sun was just beginning to peek over the horizon, casting a soft glow across the lawn. As I stood there, I couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. I had taken control of my space again. But deep down, I knew that this was only the beginning. Linda and her crew wouldn't back down easily. They'd try something else, something worse, something that might make me question whether I was really in control. But I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. I wasn't going to back down. As the day wore on, I found myself growing more anxious, but not out of fear. It was excitement. I knew that today was the day Linda would show up, all self-righteous and full of herself, expecting me to let her waltz right in and take control of my life. But that wasn't going to happen. I had a few things planned. By mid-afternoon, I heard the distinct sound of a car pulling up in front of my house. My heart raced as I peeked through the window, seeing Linda's white BMW parked in the driveway. She wasn't alone. She had a few other members of the HOA with her, and it looked like they were ready to take action. I couldn't help but smirk. They had no idea what they were walking into. I opened the door, feeling a surge of confidence as I stepped out onto the porch. Linda was standing there, clipboard in hand, that fake sweet smile plastered on her face. "Jake," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I see you've made some changes." I didn't respond at first. I just stared at her, letting the silence hang in the air. Linda seemed to shift uncomfortably, but she quickly recovered, walking up the steps like she owned the place. "I've come to take care of the lock situation," she continued. "We need to make sure everything is secure around here." I raised an eyebrow. "Secure?" I repeated. "That's funny, because I thought I was the one who needed to feel secure in my own home. And I'm pretty sure it's not you who gets to decide that." The look on her face was priceless. For a moment, she didn't know how to respond. But then, she cleared her throat, standing up straighter. "We're just trying to keep the neighborhood safe," she said, her tone trying to sound reasonable, but it was clear she was getting frustrated. "Safety? Funny, because I've never felt more unsafe than when you people decided to change my locks without my permission." I stepped aside and gestured toward the door. "But go ahead, try again. See if you can open it." She hesitated for a second, but then she walked up to the door, fiddling with her keys, trying to get the new lock to turn. Of course, she couldn't. She kept twisting the key, over and over, until she finally looked up at me, her face turning red with embarrassment. "What did you do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "It's a vault door," I said, watching her struggle. "You didn't think I was just going to let you walk in here, did you? You're not the boss of me, Linda." I am. The silence that followed was thick. The other members of the HOA were standing off to the side, not sure what to do or say. I could tell they were all a little uneasy, and I wasn't sure if that made me feel better or worse. Linda, however, was furious. She shot me a look that could freeze ice, but I stood firm. This is my home, I continued, my voice calm but unwavering. And you're not welcome here. Not until you show me some respect. She didn't say anything for a moment, but then she turned to walk away, her heels clicking on the pavement. This isn't over, Jake, she called back. You'll regret this. I watched her leave, a smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. She was right about one thing. It wasn't over, but it wasn't going to be her who had the last word. It would be me, and I would make sure she never messed with my home again. It had been a week since Linda's little visit, and I knew that the storm was far from over. The vault door had done its job, keeping her out and sending a clear message that I wasn't going to let her, or the HOA, run roughshod over my property. But despite her huffing and puffing, I could tell she wasn't done yet. She'd be back, and this time, she'd bring backup. Sure enough, the doorbell rang that afternoon, and I wasn't surprised to see Linda standing there, flanked by 2 more members of the HOA. She wasn't smiling this time. The smugness had been replaced with something more dangerous, determination. Jake, she said, her voice tight. We need to talk. I took a deep breath and opened the door, standing tall and calm, the weight of the last few days hanging over me like a shield. Talk. About what? I replied, keeping my voice neutral. About your violation, she said, her eyes narrowing. We're here to resolve this issue once and for all. You've made your point, but this needs to stop. I raised an eyebrow, standing a little straighter. Made my point. I repeated. Linda, this is my property. My home. I don't need permission from you or anyone else to live my life the way I see fit. She ignored my words, stepping forward with that same clipboard in her hand. This isn't just about you anymore, Jake. The community is starting to complain. We've had numerous reports from neighbors about your behavior, and we can't let this go on. If you don't comply, we'll be forced to take further action. I could feel my pulse start to quicken. I had dealt with bullies before, but this was something else. They weren't just pushing my buttons. They were trying to take my life apart piece by piece. And I wasn't about to let that happen. Take action. I asked, my voice calm but firm. Like what? You really think you can just force me to change because you don't like what I've done? Linda's eyes flashed with anger, but she quickly regained her composure. We're not asking for much, Jake, she said, her tone dripping with feigned sweetness. All we want is for you to comply with the HOA's rules. Change the door back, get rid of the security measures, and everything will go back to normal. I could see it now. This was their game. They didn't care about the rules or about making things right. They just wanted control. They wanted me to kneel to their authority, to bend to their will. And I wasn't about to do that. No, I said, the word feeling like the only thing I could say. No, I'm not going to do that. This is my home, my space. And if you don't like it, then maybe it's time for you to leave. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, none of us spoke. Linda's expression was unreadable, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She was trying to figure out her next move. But I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of backing down. Instead, I stood there, unwavering, as the silence stretched between us. Fine, she said after a long pause, her voice quiet but fierce. But don't think this is over, Jake. We'll be back, and we'll make sure you regret this. I watched her turn and walk away, the other members of the HOA following closely behind her. The sound of their footsteps faded into the distance, and I was left standing there, knowing that this battle wasn't finished. But it didn't matter. I had taken a stand, and that was all I needed to feel like I had won. The next few days felt like a waiting game. Linda and the HOA had tried to push me around before, but I knew they were planning something bigger this time. I could feel it. The air seemed heavier with tension, but I wasn't going to let their threats get to me. Every time I thought about the situation, the more I knew I was right to stand my ground. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I wasn't about to let anyone take that from me. I kept my routine. I worked, I ate, I went for runs around the neighborhood, anything to stay busy and focused. But I never stopped thinking about what Linda might do next. A week had passed since that conversation, and I could tell the HOA was starting to grow impatient. They hadn't shown up at my door, but I knew they wouldn't stay quiet forever. Then, one afternoon, my phone rang. It was a local number, one I didn't recognize. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. Jake, the voice on the other end said, and I immediately recognized it as Linda. We need to talk again. I let out a sigh, feeling a wave of frustration wash over me. About what? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. About your little stunt, she replied, her tone sharp. You think you've won, don't you? Well, you haven't. I leaned back in my chair, running my hand through my hair. Linda, this isn't about winning or losing. This is about me protecting my home. You're the one who's been crossing lines, not me. That's not how this works, Jake, she said, her voice growing more agitated. You don't get to make up your own rules. We have a system here, and you're making it difficult for everyone. We won't stand for it. I could feel my anger rising, but I knew I needed to stay calm. I'm not the problem here, Linda. You are, I said, letting the words sink in. You're the one trying to control everything. You're the one who changed my locks. You're the one who thought you could just walk in and take over. I won't stand for it. There was a long pause on the other end, and for a moment, I thought maybe I had gotten through to her. But then she spoke again, her voice colder than before. You're making a huge mistake, Jake, she said. We've given you plenty of chances to do the right thing. But you're clearly too stubborn to listen. If you don't comply, we'll have no choice but to escalate things. We'll make sure this is the end of your little rebellion. Escalate it all you want, I said, my voice steady. I'm not backing down. This is my home, and I'm not letting anyone take it from me. With that, I hung up the phone, my hand trembling slightly. The line had been drawn, and there was no going back. I knew that the HOA wasn't going to give up easily, but I wasn't about to let them win. The next move was mine. I had to be prepared for whatever came next. The quiet before the storm had ended. Now, it was time for the storm to break, and I was ready for it. The following morning, I woke up to an unsettling sense of calm, the kind that precedes a storm. My mind raced through the conversation I had with Linda yesterday, replaying every word she said. I knew she wasn't just bluffing. She meant what she said. The HOA wasn't going to let this slide. They'd already tried to bend me to their will, and now, it was only a matter of time before they'd escalate things. But I wasn't backing down. This was bigger than a lock or a door. This was about respect, about standing up for myself and my property. I had to remind myself of that. I couldn't let their threats get to me. The phone call felt like a declaration of war, and now, I had to prepare for the battle. I walked out into my backyard and stood still for a moment, breathing in the fresh morning air. The sounds of the neighborhood were quiet, peaceful, but I knew that wouldn't last for long. Linda would be back. I had no doubt about it. I spent the next couple of hours making sure my defenses were in place. I had already changed the locks on my front door, replaced it with something far more secure, but that wasn't going to be enough. I needed something else, something they couldn't anticipate. It had to be subtle. It had to be something that would put the HOA in their place without giving them an easy way to retaliate. I thought about it carefully. I knew I had to act fast before they came up with another scheme to mess with my life. By noon, I had a plan. It was simple, effective, and it would make sure the HOA knew I was done playing games. I wasn't going to give them any more chances to invade my space. I wasn't going to let Linda or her little group think they could control me. I drove to the hardware store and picked up everything I needed. A new set of cameras, high-quality motion detectors, and a few extra surprises just in case. It wasn't just about stopping them from getting into my house anymore. It was about sending a message. I was going to make sure Linda knew exactly who she was dealing with. After I got home, I set everything up quickly, making sure the cameras were well placed and the motion detectors were discreet but effective. I wanted to cover every angle, every entrance. I wasn't just protecting my house. I was protecting my peace of mind. By the time evening came, I felt ready. The neighborhood was calm, almost eerily so, but I knew it was only a matter of time before Linda and her crew made their move. As I sat in my living room, watching the security monitors, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. And then, just as the sun began to set, I saw it. A car turned into my driveway. Linda's BMW. My heart skipped a beat. This was it. They were finally making their move. I grabbed my phone and checked the security cameras again. Everything was set. I wasn't going to let them surprise me. I stood up, walking over to the door, and as I looked out the window, I could see Linda getting out of her car, clipboard in hand, a determined look on her face. The other two members of the HOA were with her, standing silently by her side. It was clear they had come prepared. I took a deep breath and opened the door. Linda, I said, my voice steady. I was wondering when you'd show up again. She smiled, but it wasn't friendly. Jake, she replied, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. We need to resolve this issue once and for all. I thought I already made it clear, Linda, I said, stepping out onto the porch. This is my home, and you're not welcome here. She frowned, looking taken aback for a moment, but then her face hardened. You don't understand, she said, her voice cold. This isn't just about you. This is about the entire community. We won't stand for someone like you messing with the way things work around here. I crossed my arms, feeling the tension rise in the air. And what are you going to do about it? I asked. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward the other two members of the HOA. They stepped forward, but it was clear they were waiting for her lead. Linda looked at me, then at her team, and back again. This isn't over, Jake, she said finally. You've made a mistake, and we'll make sure you regret it. She turned on her heel, her heels clicking against the pavement, and walked back toward the car. Her followers followed closely behind her. As they drove off, I stood there, watching them go. The threat was real, but so was my resolve. I wasn't going to back down. The battle wasn't over yet, and I was ready for whatever came next. The following days were quieter, but I could feel the tension building. Linda and her team of HOA enforcers had left with their threats hanging in the air, but I knew they wouldn't back off easily. It was only a matter of time before they tried something else. I wasn't naive enough to think they'd just walk away, but this time, I was ready for them. My mind raced as I kept my focus, putting all my energy into my work and not letting their intimidation tactics get to me. The cameras were still up, the motion detectors were in place, and everything was secure. I had taken every step I could to protect my property, but something told me the HOA was going to escalate their efforts soon. Then, on the 5th day after Linda's visit, it happened. I was sitting at my desk, working on a few things when I heard a loud knock at the door. My first instinct was to check the security monitors. Linda, of course. She wasn't wasting any time. I took a deep breath and walked to the door, fully aware that I had prepared myself for whatever she was about to throw at me. I opened it slowly, my eyes meeting Linda's cold, calculating gaze. She wasn't alone this time. Two new faces stood behind her, both wearing expressions that told me they were ready for a fight. Jake, Linda began, her tone much sharper than it had been the last time we spoke. This has gone on long enough. I didn't say anything, just stood there, watching her. You've left us no choice, she continued. The HOA has voted, and we are officially fining you for your noncompliance. You've ignored every attempt we've made to work things out, and now we are taking legal action. I raised an eyebrow. Legal action? I repeated, my voice calm. For what? Protecting my own property. Linda glanced at the others behind her, and they all nodded. For your refusal to adhere to community guidelines, she said. You've made your property a nuisance to the neighborhood, and we won't stand for it. The words hung in the air, but I wasn't intimidated. I had been through far worse than a couple of HOA bullies. You really think you can just walk in here and dictate what I do with my own home? I asked, my voice firm. You've tried everything else, changing the locks, threatening fines, but you're not going to scare me into giving in. There was a long pause, and for a moment, Linda seemed to be struggling with her next words. I could see the frustration building behind her eyes, but I wasn't going to back down. You'll regret this, she finally muttered under her breath, though I could tell it wasn't as much a warning as it was a threat. I'm sure I will, I replied calmly, stepping aside and closing the door slowly. I wasn't about to let them have the last word. As I stood there, staring at the door, I could feel the weight of the situation press down on me. They weren't going to give up, but neither was I. I had prepared for this moment, and I knew exactly what to do. The next step was clear. I was going to fight back, but I wasn't going to do it the way they expected. I wasn't going to resort to violence, but I would make sure they understood that messing with me was a mistake they wouldn't be able to fix. The battle was far from over, but I had a plan, and this time, it was going to be them who regretted crossing me. I smiled to myself, knowing that I had the upper hand, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The next few days felt like a constant watch, every sound, every movement in the neighborhood sending me into alert mode. Linda and her HOA team were clearly making their moves behind the scenes, pushing harder, getting more aggressive with their threats. I knew they wouldn't give up without a fight, but this time, I wasn't just going to sit back and let them steamroll me. I had to make a calculated move. I wasn't about to let them push me to the point where I had to resort to anything rash, but I needed them to feel the pressure, to know that I wasn't backing down. And then it hit me. If Linda thought I was going to fold under pressure, if she thought her empty threats and fines were enough to scare me, she was wrong. I was going to hit her where it hurt, but I was going to do it in a way that she couldn't easily fight back. That afternoon, I sat down and started gathering everything I needed. The original documents from when I bought the house, the zoning laws for the area, and every fine, every letter they had sent me over the past few months. I knew it wasn't enough to just defend my property. I needed to make sure they understood they were playing a dangerous game. By the time evening fell, I had everything ready. I had made copies of the documents, carefully organized, and I had written a formal letter of my own. It was time to turn the tables. I waited until late in the evening when the neighborhood was quiet, the air cool with the promise of an impending storm. With everything in hand, I drove to the HOA office. It was small, unassuming, tucked away in a corner strip mall that hardly anyone noticed unless they were looking for it. I parked my car, grabbed the documents, and walked in. The office was empty, just a lonely desk with piles of paper stacked high. I left my letter there, a simple statement of my intentions, and attached the copies of all the evidence I had gathered. I didn't just want to stop them. I wanted to make sure Linda knew exactly who she was dealing with. The letter explained everything. How I had complied with every reasonable request, how the HOA had no right to infringe upon my property, and how, under the law, they were the ones in violation. I also attached a formal request for a meeting to discuss this further, but I made one thing clear. The next time they showed up at my door, they wouldn't find just a man defending his home. They'd find someone who knew exactly how to fight back, legally and without mercy. I left the office without a second glance, feeling the weight of what I had just done settle in. It wasn't just a letter, it was a declaration. I was done being the target. The ball was now in Linda's court. I knew it wouldn't be long before they responded, but I wasn't worried. I had taken the high ground. And as I drove home that night, I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for my house anymore. I was fighting for my right to live without fear, without constant threats from people who thought they could control my life. I had crossed a line, and I wasn't looking back. The next morning, I felt the weight of the letter I'd left at the HOA office settle in, knowing the storm I had set in motion was inevitable. It wasn't just a simple request for a meeting anymore. It was a challenge. Linda and the others would have no choice but to respond, and when they did, I would be ready. I had carefully laid out the groundwork, and I knew the law was on my side. Now, I just had to wait for their move. The hours dragged by slowly, and every knock at the door sent my heart racing. I checked the security cameras twice, making sure everything was still locked down tight. No one had come, no one had called, but I could feel the tension building. Late in the afternoon, just as the sun was starting to set, my phone rang. I looked down to see the HOA's office number flashing on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered, steeling myself for whatever they had planned. "Jake," the voice on the other end said, and I immediately recognized it as Linda's. "We've reviewed your letter, and we're not happy." Her tone was cold, clipped, and I could sense the frustration in her voice. "I told you we would escalate this if you didn't comply," she continued. "And now we've contacted our lawyers, and we're moving forward with legal action." I didn't flinch. "That's your decision," I replied, my voice calm. "But I've already told you, I'm not backing down. You can try to intimidate me all you want, but it's not going to work." There was a long pause on the other end, the silence thick with tension. Then Linda spoke again, this time with an edge in her voice. "This doesn't have to be difficult, Jake. All you have to do is take down the security measures, remove the vault door, and comply with the HOA's rules. It's that simple." I smiled, though I knew she couldn't see it. "You still don't get it, do you, Linda?" I said. "This isn't about compliance. This is about control. You and the HOA think you can push me around, but I'm not playing that game anymore. You'll regret this," she spat, her anger rising. "We're not done yet, Jake. Not by a long shot." I could feel the weight of her words, but I wasn't scared. I had already made up my mind. "We'll see about that," I said. "But just remember, this isn't my fight. It's yours." I hung up the phone and leaned back in my chair, letting the silence wash over me. The battle had officially begun, and there was no turning back now. I knew Linda and the HOA wouldn't back down easily, but neither would I. I had played by the rules. I had tried to be reasonable, But now I had no choice. It was time to fight. The next move was theirs, and I was ready for whatever they threw my way. I wasn't just defending my home anymore. I was defending my rights. And this time, I wasn't going to let them win.